Ethan, what are we drinking this evening?
Quiet Man, the finest whiskey in existence.
All right. And for the benefit of our audience, explain why you think it's the finest whiskey in existence.
That would be because the best whiskeys in existence are Irish, and this is the best Irish whiskey.
Okay.
A good full flavor for a much less full price.
Can't agree with that. It's not even $30, so it is good and solid.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And although the 8-year, which you're going to pay a little more than 34, is superb. This is just the regular. The 8-year is absolutely superb.
I have thoroughly enjoyed both with you in the past, so I cannot argue at all. They're great whiskeys. The 8-year is finished in bourbon casks, isn't it?
That sounds right. I'm sure somebody will correct us.
I feel like it's finished in something. But you can't go wrong with Quiet Man. So, and I know that you also like it because of the Quiet Man movie starring John Wayne.
That is also true. And my grandfather was a very quiet man. And now I drink it in honor of him.
A quiet man who speaks little, but whose words carry much weight, I imagine.
Yeah.
Excellent. I have something not so fine, but for a leisure podcast, I decided that single malt scotch was the way to go.
You can't really go wrong with the scotch either.
No, you can't.
It's very rarely the wrong choice.
This is Grangestone, and it's their bourbon cask finish. So, normal scotch, and then just finished in old bourbon barrels. So, mostly scotch, part American. Good combo.
And it's like the reverse of me, mostly American, but part Scotch.
All right. I didn't know you were part Scotch.
Yeah, my brother's been doing some research into our genealogy. Apparently, he made some mistakes when he first did it in high school, and we're a lot less German than he thought we were.
Okay.
Apparently, we come from, my ancestors were Scotch-Irish immigrants who wound up in Iowa at some point.
Okay.
But they were Scotch-Irish immigrants. And apparently, we technically have claim to the Clan Stevenson tartan and the McTavish clan tartan, because the Stevensons were absorbed into the McTavish clan in the 90s.
So Stevenson is a Scottish name or an Irish name?
It's a Scottish name, but they had the Scots in Northern Ireland are related to many of the Scottish clans.
Okay.
And technically, Ireland is the original home of the Scots as a people. When the Celts were run out of Britain, they went to Ireland and wound up taking over there. And the Scots went to Scotland.
Okay.
They went to what is now Scotland, what had then been called Caledonia. Part of it had been called Caledonia.
So they went to Ireland and then from there to back across the channel to Scotland, or?
As far as my specific family, I'm not 100% positive of when they first came to this country. But yeah, apparently they were originally Presbyterians from Northern Ireland who were descended from a Scotch clan.
You were doing a good job redeeming your ancestors. So.
I'm sure they were fine people. They were ministers and engineers. I'm sure they were honest, law-abiding, hardworking people, but they were technically heretics. So hopefully they're not. They don't have to spend too much longer in purgatory.
Hopefully not. Speaking of Northern Ireland, a brief diversion into sports. The Open Championship is happening this weekend. Golf, indeed. It is the oldest golf championship, from what I understand. And it's usually played in Britain or Scotland or such. but it is in Northern Ireland this year at Royal Portrush.
Ooh, very
It was
nice.
played there in the 40s and 50s, and then it was played there in 2019, and they have it back there this year. So it is quite rare for the Open Championship, or the British Open, as some Americans will call it, to make its way across the channel. But is it the Channel or the Irish Sea?
The Irish Sea, the Channel, is what's between England and France.
Okay, I forget
That
what I've
is
been
the
saying
English
about the
Channel.
Channel. The Irish Sea, then.
Yeah.
It's rare for that championship to make its way across the sea, then, but cool that it does.
Very nice.
But I'll limit the sports diversion, so let's not.
Sports are leisurely, especially golf.
Exactly. It's not entirely unrelated. Because we wanted to talk about leisure this evening. And it seems to me that when one thinks about leisure in the modern era in which we live, we don't have a good understanding of what leisure is. Like, we know what it is, obviously, to an extent, but we probably count a number of things as leisure that should not be counted as leisure. And we probably engage with it either too much or too little. So how would you define leisure to start?
Well, most of where I get my understanding of leisure comes from this book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, by Joseph Pieper.
Okay.
Who was a 20th century philosopher and thinker and a Catholic. Most of how he defines leisure. Well, for one thing, he never actually gives a full definition of leisure as a word. But he links leisure, and he calls it the basis of culture for a reason, because the words for leisure and culture, in most of their original senses, actually go back to the words for religion and school.
Okay.
So in Greek, in ancient Greek, the word for leisure is very, very close to the word for school. And the word culture comes from kultus, which is also where we get the word cult, which primarily has a derogatory term now. People think of, a bunch of hippies standing in a circle singing songs and, oh, why can't I call my mom anymore, when they think of cults. But
Mm-hmm. A not undeserved stereotype.
Not undeserved stereotype, but the word does not deserve to be treated that way.
Okay.
Because the word cult actually just refers to culture. It refers to what makes a society.
Mm-hmm.
The ways that people operate. And leisure is intrinsically linked to the holy days and the festivals that all societies have, that they share and they celebrate throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
As Christians, we have a festival once a week on Sundays. That's our day of rest. It's the one where we're not supposed to do any menial or servile work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Pieper also goes into a definition of servile work. And actually, for the first, 2/3 of the essay, he spends more time talking about work than he does about leisure. But he kind of needs that, because he's writing this in early 50s. What was it? 1952.
Okay.
So that is at the time when people think, well, work is what you do to go and do stuff to get paid money, and so you can pay for things. And basically, he goes into a very long explanation for why the modern concept of work is just as wrong as the modern concept of leisure. But I think the closest term, or the closest word that we can use to just simplify leisure, is just rest. But it's
Okay.
not just that. Rest is an aspect of leisure. So these days, when most people hear the word leisure, they're not actually picturing leisure in their heads. Most of the time, they actually confuse leisure with luxury.
Okay.
They think, people who live a life of leisure, that means they can just like lie around and order servants around and drink Mai Tais on the beach all day. Well, that's not what leisure is. That is luxury. And technically, that's not even really luxury. Most people think of leisure as something frivolous. They think that it's idleness or that it's wasting time or inactivity or inaction, which is really not what leisure is. Man is not meant to be stagnant completely. Man is meant to, for one thing, work. But we were created to know, love, and serve God in this life so that we can be with Him in the next. It's right there in the Baltimore Catechism that we can use to teach second graders. It's real easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So leisure is partially rest, but also partially study, partially learning, and partially contemplating. And those are all things that people don't actually know how to do anymore. You know, if you say you're going for a leisurely stroll, well, that's not just going for a walk and that's it. That's, when you're actually having a leisurely walk, you're observing what's around you.
Mm-hmm.
You see the trees, you see the birds that are landing in the trees, you see whatever insects or other animals that you might see out there, you see other people, you see the cars that go past, and you see this and that and the other thing. And you're just sort of absorbing it consciously and being present in that moment and
Mm-hmm.
actually contemplating what's around you actively. You're not, your head's not really on a swivel. You're not going from this to this to this to this to this to this to this. It's more of a relaxed type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're not constantly just churning out thoughts. Is you're pondering, discerning, and meditating.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what leisure mostly is. Leisure is a time for us to be elevating our minds and hearts to something higher than ourselves. And that's really what the arts and music, literature, that's what that's all for. That's why we absorb those things when we are in our leisure time.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're meant to be elevating our minds and thinking of something else, which is an active process. So, yeah, I think just this image of people sitting around and doing nothing, that's not leisure. That's laziness. That is sloth. So having an understanding of leisure is actually having an understanding of the virtues that are opposed to the vice of sloth. Because the vice of sloth is manifested in two opposing ways, right? So sloth is basically, it tends to be defined as laziness, but it's more of basically it's just a spiritual bankruptcy or a spiritual laziness. It's a lack of desire to give any attention to your spiritual or your intellectual or your moral life or just the things that actually do matter. So it's either one, you are just incredibly lazy and you don't do things because you don't want to do them. You're not making any effort to better yourself because you're just lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, you work and work and work and work and work and keep yourself busy, 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 so you don't have to slow down, because if you slow down, you may have to think about something that's actually important for once. So those are the two opposite ways in which the vice of sloth can manifest itself in a person. Leisure is a way of counteracting that. So leisure is not opposed to work. It is actually a complementary source to work, or a complementary attitude. Leisure is the bride of work, basically. That work and leisure must go hand in hand. There, you go out in the field and you do whatever it is you do in a field for the majority of the day, but then in the evening, you come home and you sit by the fire and you read and you pray.
Mm-hmm.
And you do things that elevate your mind. And even while you're out on the field these days, if you're on a tractor, you got a lot of time to be out there and just think and just contemplate and be.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really what leisure is. It's rest and meditation and contemplation and learning.
As you were talking, I had this working definition come to my head of like what work is and what leisure is. And the definition I had for work was attending to the needs and necessities of your society, of those people around you. And for leisure, it was attending to the needs and necessities of yourself. But I like the way in which you augmented that by saying, no, this isn't just for yourself. This is an aiming upward. This is an aiming towards something, someone transcendent, someone divine, who we know to be God, who we know to be our creator and maker and father.
So another really good way of thinking about it actually comes from this book, The Intellectual Life by A.G. Sertalange. It's a Dominican friar from the last century as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts it this way. Hygienists recommend 3 things for the body: the bath, the air bath, and the inward bath of pure water. I should like to add for the soul the bath of silence, in order to tone up the organism of the spirit, to accentuate the personality, and to produce the active consciousness to it, as the athlete feels his muscles and prepares their play by the inner movements which are their very life.
That's a great point. We're not good at sitting in silence. Why is that, though? I mean, obviously I can come up with an answer, but why is it that we struggle so much with silence? Why we pivot to either kind of sloth that you described earlier?
Well, I think it is a really good question. I think a lot of it is the same thing that you keep hearing over and over and over and over again. They talk about screens and media and the constant stimulation from sources that are just all around.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's the older generation listing that as an example of what's wrong with the young generation. But I think it's been a thing for everybody. Like it's always been like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even 70 years ago, a man might get up in the morning, and then the first thing he does is read his newspaper before he even greets the family. Or there was a trope of a man who just buries his face in the newspaper all the time and doesn't really even look at his wife or his kids. And then he goes to work, spends 8 hours a day in an office doing who knows what,
Mm-hmm.
just office work. And then he comes home, and then to relax, he probably just watches television.
Yep.
Which is just another form of stimulation going into your head, even when it was from the old tube televisions that scientifically were different than the LED ones that we have now. But we have a lot more stimulation to an extent, but I think the excess of stimulation is a product of a post-industrial age. A post-industrial age that tries to churn out as much product as it possibly can, as fast as it possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
to provide for as great of a profit to as many people as possible. And when you look at the timeline of history, and we'll just take the time after our Lord, when you look at the timeline of history and what are considered in classes and taught in classes as world-shaking events, and what arguably actually are world-shifting events, the biggest ones before the 20th century, you have the birth and death of our Lord, so the life of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
the fall of the Roman Empire, the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire, then the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant Revolt, as it can be more aptly called, and then the French Revolution, which are linked to specific periods. And there are key moments within those periods, but I think those five will always appear in any historian's list of the top 10 most influential events in world history for the last 2,000 years. Now, if we just look in the last 100 years, we have the First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, we had the Spanish flu, we had, I did forget to mention the Black Plague earlier, but that was primarily just localized to Europe. But anyway, we have First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, the Cuban Missile Crisis. As far, things that changed the world, literally anything Russia did for the last century, or the majority of things that the United States did after the Second World War, were relatively world-shaping. JFK's assassination didn't just affect the US, it affected other countries too. It seems like the progress of life, or the progress of civilization, just kept speeding up faster and faster and faster and faster after the Industrial Age. It's post-Enlightenment, but after Enlightenment is the Industrial Revolution. But during the Industrial Revolution, we have just invention after invention after invention that keeps getting churned out. And new inventions just get immediately adopted. And something is only new for maybe a year. And then it's the next thing after that. Things are constantly being updated and constantly being changed. You've got the sexual revolution, which had just in the middle of the last century decided to completely upend the entire rest of human history's understanding of basically everything, every form of sexuality. And my point is the last century probably moved faster than any other century in history. And that probably wound up shaping and twisting the way that people think about work and about leisure. Because Joseph Pieper also talks about how hard work for hard work's sake kind of became one of the slogans of the modern world during the 20th century. That, working a job and working yourself to the bone is somehow necessarily a good thing. And you ask why, and then they say, well, it's because it's hard work. And man is made to work, and work should not be easy. But he quotes Aquinas, who we all know is almost never wrong.
This is true.
So he quotes Aquinas in the Summa, the finest and the greatest theological and philosophical work ever written by a human hand, next to Scripture. Hard work is what is good. In the Summa Theologica, we find St. Thomas propounding a contrary opinion. The essence of virtue consists in the good rather than in the difficult. Not everything that is more difficult is necessarily more meritorious. It must be more difficult in such a way that it is at the same time good in yet a higher way. So if there's no higher good to be achieved out of it, it doesn't need to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you should do hard things, but before you do the hard thing, make sure that it is a hard thing that will actually improve you
Mm-hmm.
as a person and improve your virtue. At a minimum, that is what the difficulty of a task should do. Otherwise, sometimes machines are a good thing. Sometimes computers are a good thing. Sometimes calculators are a good thing. Because, the excuse of, well, you won't always have a calculator on you, or you won't always have a computer nearby, is an absurd thing to say in the United States of America in the year of our Lord 2025.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of really horrifying things would have to happen for you to not have a calculator or a computer nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And things that on the level, the level of bad that they would be is, you don't need to worry about the math problem anymore.
Yeah, if it becomes reasonable that a serial killer might show up and threaten you and your family, unless you, without a calculator, can solve an algebra 2 problem, you probably don't have to worry.
Oh, I was thinking like nationwide blackouts and things like that. Because you probably have, if for some reason you don't have a computer or a calculator, or they've been rendered inoperable,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's computer and calculator have all been rendered inoperable, there are worse things going on than completing A plus B equals C.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got bigger issues than trying to solve for X at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, because we do have an entire generation, so we have a young generation that just expects everything to be easy and demands that everything just be easy. But we also have an older generation that expects and demands everything to be significantly harder than it does actually need to be.
And we find ourselves in the middle going, can we have some common sense?
Yeah.
I look at the one and I say, what's the point? And I look at the other and I say, what's the point? Don't work yourself to the bone for no reason. And don't smoke weed. Just don't be that type of person. There's a lot of arguments against smoking weed, by the way, but one of the best I've ever heard is basically, do we need more couch potatoes?
No,
we don't.
No, we don't.
We just don't.
That's, and I this is a tangent, but I've talked to a lot of people that have smoked weed and partake in cannabis in many forms in multiple occasions, frequently. And I'm like, what good does it do? Like, it doesn't actually help you
Mm-hmm.
at all. Now, if there's a medicinal use for the oil in the plant, then sure. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, to recreationally basically murder your brain cells and render yourself useless and turn yourself into a giggling, quivering mess, I don't think so. Like, in no way do I see weed improving the virtue of a person. I have seen tobacco improve people's virtue.
Mm-hmm.
when it's used correctly, specifically when it's smoked in a pipe.
But I'll promote cigars.
You will promote cigars.
You can't
because,
take that from me.
And I enjoy a fine cigar too. But I will also make the argument that pipe smoking is more frugal because you buy a pipe and you buy tobacco, and one packet of tobacco, which you can buy for the price of, a box of a small package of cigars, will last you about 10 times as long as the small package of cigars.
Well, of course, there's no argument on the frugality side. But nicotine acts differently in your body than THC. Nicotine is a focus drug, and it's actually really healthy for you in a lot of ways. One of the reasons that cigarettes are not so good for you is because of the way in which it's ingested and all of the extra crap that you're ingesting. But weed, on the other hand, if you're just getting high off of it, that strikes me as, to tie this back into something we were talking about before, a retreat from silence. In the same way that overuse of alcohol would be, or overwork would be, or over YouTubing. Hi, people on YouTube, would be. So,
yeah, I think what that evokes in my mind is sort of an idea that most people use weed to get high because they don't actually know how to rest. They don't know how to be still. Which you kind of be still just by being still. There isn't really a how-to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, well, I want to do it this way, and it's more pleasant when I do it this way. And I don't really have to put the effort of leisure into it, because there is an active effort put into leisure when you're reading, or even if you're listening to music. It can be both active and passive, but there's not really anything active about weed. Now, I know that there are two different types of weed. There's two different things that it can do to you. There's the one that relaxes you, and then there's the one that basically acts like the highest caffeine high that you've ever been on. It actually can make you more alert and make your senses more heightened. And neither of those are good. And if you want to know the difference between, we'll just say, we'll leave cigarettes out of the conversation because that's an entirely different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you have, your weed smokers, and then you have your tobacco smokers, whether it's a pipe or a cigar. If you want to know the difference between weed and tobacco, ask each group why they smoke that thing. Ask the potheads why they smoke weed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I smoke it to get high. Why do you smoke it to get high? Well, I like being high. You ask the cigar and pipe smokers why they smoke pipes and cigars, and they'll usually say something, if they're like us, along the lines of, well, I like the taste of a good cigar. Or it's a wonderful thing to accompany a conversation. And I think that's just the majority of people when we talk about it.
Well, it ties into
I smoke a cigar or a pipe to relax. Well, it's not that you're expecting the nicotine to relax you. It's no more than just having a drink in the evening is there specifically to relax you. It's because it is a good aid to relaxing. It is a good aid to leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Which technically what we're doing right now is leisure.
Yeah.
You and I are sitting here and having a wonderful conversation, formerly over very good whiskey and scotch. Mine's all gone.
No.
Because I drink like an Irishman.
I have plenty left.
But yeah, what we're doing now is leisure. We're sitting, we're having a conversation, and we're thinking about things, and we're talking about things, and we are unraveling mysteries of the world, everything around us.
even schmucks like us. We are elevating our minds towards He who is transcendent and divine.
Yeah. And we don't have to be right. We just have to think.
This is true.
That's the job of the philosopher. I don't have to be right. I just have to think. And admit it when I'm wrong.
This is true. And to go back to the by your fruits you shall judge them, I think anybody who's experienced cigars and pipes properly would agree with what we've been saying. Weed, on the other hand, it might be fine in certain doses, but in general, and especially at the THC concentrations that are bred now, it just seems to be something that is not conducive towards actual good leisure. But it's instead is something harmful to the human person,
Yes.
damaging and hindering the faculties that God gave us. So,
I had someone once try to convince me to at least try it once. And he's like, "Well, you're a Christian. It's from the earth. God made it." And I'm like, "Yes, God made it. He made it for rope."
what was his answer to that?
God made hemp for rope. Because that is the strongest rope you could ever use, is stuff that's made from hemp. From hemp fibers. I don't know if you knew that, but if you didn't, you just learned it.
So that's what they were growing in Lothlorien. The rope that
that's
they gave
what we'll
Frodo
say
and
it
Sam.
is. Yeah. But, the elves know how to use things correctly.
They do.
It's not that they have a magic of the elves, it's that they have a higher understanding of the nature of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And a higher understanding of how things work.
This is true.
One small bite can fill the stomach of a grown man. And
Indeed.
yes, they know what weed is for. They know hemp was made for rope.
They do. The ancients and wise.
Even our founding fathers, Washington said that he thought that hemp would be the United States' greatest export. Because the best hemp actually grows here, naturally. That's actually where the rest of the world mostly got it from. The problem is, people don't use it correctly. And that was what Washington said. If it is used correctly, it would be the U.S.'s greatest export. It's the using it correctly that people tend to get wrong.
Well, we tend to not be very good at that. But
yeah, something about concupiscence and the fallenness of human nature.
Wait, I don't have that.
I didn't know you were a Baptist.
Me saying that I don't is all the evidence you need that I do. That in my existence. I want to pivot from this to bring up something that you talked about earlier, because you mentioned study as a form of leisure.
Correct.
And we both have been, I can see how it would be a form of leisure, but we both have been to college, and we both either have had the experience or know of people who have had the experience of studying 20 plus credits at a time, 7 days a week, dealing with the ups and downs in life and trying to balance all of that, and it's exhausting. How is that leisure? Or is that just a good thing done too much? Or how would you assess that?
Pieper has something to say about that too. He also defines intellectual work as being something different from servile work.
Okay.
Study is a form of leisure, but I would say that, for a lot of students, when you've got a lot on your plate, when you've got 5,000 word essays to write in the next 2 days, that's work. That is effort. And even intellectual work is physical, because intellectual uses the mind. The mind is a part of the body. So, a strain on the mind is a strain on the rest of the body. Because the mind and the body are linked. It's not like they're two completely separate things.
Mm-hmm. They're just parts of the same whole.
So I don't know that study as far as the modern idea of school is concerned or the modern process of school, I don't know that I would call that leisure. I would call that an intellectual work. So it's still good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's efforts that you're putting in order to get something out of it. And you are elevating your mind. But, at that point, resting from your intellectual work, you may just want to watch a movie. You may just want to watch television. You may just do something that is completely unrelated to what it was you were just doing. Actually, the best way to have leisure from intellectual work is sport.
Hmm.
Because you rest your mind when you work your body. And when you rest your body, you are working your mind.
Good point. We tend to be doing one of those two things.
And you have to.
Basically all times.
So, when you just sit there and you doom scroll all day long, you're not working either. You're just absorbing.
Or you could say you're working your mind, but you wouldn't say that in a leisurely way. It's a stress.
Yeah.
It's a stress on the mind, and it's not a good stress on the mind.
So, that, I think, is the difference between servile manual work and intellectual mental work. A lot of people make a living with their minds. Authors do. Scientists do. Technically, lawyers do. Doctors. A lot of people make a living on their minds, so they have an intellectual work. So their leisure is either something intellectual that is unrelated, or it's something physical. That's why doctors play golf on Wednesday. I'm not going to fault the doctor for playing golf on Wednesday. Because you know why he plays golf on Wednesday? It's so he can be in the office on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
When you are not working, so he can take care of you.
Yep.
So let him have his golf on Wednesday. Now, I don't think every doctor should play golf on Wednesday, because that's only good for the golf course. At that point, you just want to make sure that nobody ever gets sick on a Wednesday.
This is true.
But you understand the point, is that you have to have time away.
Yep.
Whether you play disc golf, you play golf, you play ultimate frisbee, you go and you play dodgeball, or you're in a league of some kind, you go bowling. Whatever it is, it's just something that is separate from your work and the way that you make your living. That is not that. Even if you love your work, which, as I've said before, most people should. You should love your work, and you should be happy when you come home from work. But you should also be tired. And when you're tired, you should rest, but you should never be idle.
There's a difference. There's something beautiful towards what we would call wasting time. But it's only beautiful if it's not really wasted time. Like, what I mean by the beautiful type of wasted time is I'm not working. I'm just hanging around with my family, and just being there for them. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do whatever they want to do. I'm going to go play with the kids. I'll go be with my wife. I'll go help with dinner. Like, maybe there's just the influence of modern culture in there too much, why we would even call that wasted time. Because it's wasted.
Oh, no,
because
that's
it's
not
not
wasted
work.
time at all. That is time well spent. Because it's time spent in the good of another.
Mm-hmm.
In caring for your wife and caring for your children.
Well, exactly.
So it's not wasted time at all. It's something that you are offering them something that they need, which is you.
Mm-hmm.
So this reminds me, there's an old Statler Brothers song from way back called Flowers on the Wall. I'm pretty sure it's called Flowers on the Wall. Basically, the chorus line is, counting flowers on the wall that don't bother me at all, playing solitaire till dawn with a deck of 51, smoking cigarettes and watching Captain Kangaroo, and don't tell me I have nothing to do. Now that is an illustration of a man who wastes his time.
Yep.
Because he's actually doing nothing. Never leaves his little dingy apartment. He spends his time just counting the flowers on the wallpaper. He plays solitaire with a deck that's got a card missing.
You can never win.
Which you can never win. But he does it anyway because he's just passing the time.
It's doom scrolling.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can't say that idleness or doom scrolling is a totally modern idea. Man will always find some way to avoid his work, especially modern man. And modern man is the post-industrial man. It didn't take social media for people to waste their time. It just changed the thing with which people wasted their time.
When we think about how leisure has changed in the modern era, how much of that is a direct consequence of the change that work undergoes that we talked about in episode 1?
You mean the understanding of work or the nature of work?
You could say both.
I think basically the entire, all of it was affected by that, both the understanding of leisure. I don't know that I would say necessarily the nature of leisure, because leisure is what it is. And I wouldn't say that the nature of work changed either.
I don't think we would say that the nature of good work changed.
Yeah,
But the
I don't
nature
think we
of
would say
work
that the
definitely
nature of the
changed.
thing changes. But I'll focus primarily on the understanding of the two. So work kind of wound up being this, man is made to work. So work until you drop. And retirement is your reward for hard work. You don't need to rest. You can rest when you're retired. Well, guess what? The average age for retirement is 75. Or the average age of retirement is 78. The average age of death for a man is 75. Most men in the United States today work until they die. Because the modern understanding of work is that you have to work in order to have literally anything, and you have to work until you die. You are not allowed to rest, ever. You get Sunday off, or you get the weekends off. Now, there are a lot of potential other causes for this too, like people not actually being frugal or wise with their money, so they wind up wasting a lot of it. They're not able to save, so they feel like they have to work when they're 75, and then just keel over dead at their workstation.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think, and Joseph Pieper talks about this too, that the modern understanding of leisure basically sees leisure as something that is vicious, as a waste of time. And a lot of that has to do with what the modern age thinks that time is meant to be spent on. The modern age, a lot of it thinks that time is meant to be spent on turning a profit and making money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you do that? By working. So therefore, if work is money, then more work is more money. And I had a guy look me in the eyes and tell me, well, yeah, sure, I'd like to spend a lot of time with my kids, but I like buying them nice things too. Okay,
what
yeah,
end?
more work is more money. Especially if you work overtime, you're obliged to be paid a time and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind that. I never disliked having that extra nice check on stretches of overtime. What you dislike is having to work 10 or more hours a day, 5 days a week. Coming home and eating dinner and only having enough strength to give your children a kiss goodnight.
Mm-hmm. So you can never replace you for your kids, like we talked about before. And if you manage to replace that with gifts you buy them, well, then you've failed them miserably.
Yeah, then you're not doing your job right. If you have replaced you with gifts, then you're not doing your job as a father.
Because they're never going to be able to go to their skateboard later and ask it for advice on anything in life.
Yeah.
On how to be a good human, and how to have relationships, on how to love others, how to do good work well.
A young man doesn't ask his girlfriend's car for her hand in marriage.
Nope.
He asks her father, or he should ask her father. I know there's a lot of debate about that now, too. And I don't care. That's going to be a requirement. But this modern idea that, you work to make money, so you do more work to make more money. And if you're not working, then what are you doing with yourself? What are you doing with your life if you're not actually working?
Mm-hmm.
You're just wasting your time. You're doing nothing. You're doing nothing good. You're not contributing to society. Well, by properly having time of leisure, you can contribute to your family. And your family is society. Today's children become tomorrow's adults.
Yep.
And you raise your children correctly, then they become good citizens, good Christians, honest, hardworking people that also know how to rest. As you'll notice, no one ever uses leisurely as a compliment for somebody. They'll say,
True.
"Oh, he's industrious. He's hardworking. He's good. He's a good man." But nobody ever talks about knowing when the right time is for rest or study as being a good thing or being something laudable.
Yeah.
What we actually praise is we praise the man who will get up at 4:30 in the morning and work until 6 o'clock at night to put food on the table. And making sacrifices is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no praise for the man who actually knows how to properly balance. Or there's no word for a man who knows how to rest. The highest praise we offer is for men who work way too hard, way harder than they have to. You'd be surprised how little of an actual monetary amount a human being can live on these days.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a house, clean water, and a car, you are already in less than the top 15% in the world.
You're set, basically. But to have that mindset requires two things. You need to break free from all of the training that you've had in the frenetic nature of modern life and what work is supposed to be in the eyes of the world. You need to break free from the constant spinning of that. Got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, which leads to got to buy this, got to buy this, got to buy this, got to buy this, which leads to I need a lot more money to live on than I actually do. And you also need to learn to be okay with silence.
I've not read Cardinal Sarah's book, but I've been told it's quite good. It's called The Power of Silence.
I've read part of it. I borrowed it from the church library and never gave it back, so it's in one room over from me. I do need to give it back. But the little bit of it that I did read was really, really challenging.
I'm pretty sure every day you keep it over the time that you're supposed to have it is an extra year in purgatory, especially when you borrow it from the church library.
But you see, I'm a Vikings fan, so it all balances out. Yes, another knife.
Not only are you a Vikings fan, you're also a Twins fan and a Wild fan. So you get that 3 times every year.
Yep. But anyway. Yeah, that book is really challenging. Just from the little bit I've read. Like, to understand, to even begin to understand in my mind, but in my body too. In just what silence is, the way he describes it. How to actually be still. And there's times when I have been able to move from being in a very anxious place or just stressed out place or all the above to in a place of more peace and silence. But it can take half an hour. And that half an hour sucks. Your body is trying so hard to just keep the hamster wheel going.
Yeah.
So once you break through that, then like, okay, cool, this is nice, this is awesome. Like I finally am at peace again. When was the last time I felt quite like that? A while ago. And then your natural tendencies eventually will, and life will get you back in the hamster wheel, it seems. So.
Yeah, I think learning the proper way to do leisure, as we might say, it first starts with learning how to actually quiet your mind and your soul. Because you got to shut up before you can listen. And you got to tell all the voices in your head to shut up too.
Yep.
And when Elijah went up on the mountaintop to hear the word of God, he was not in the earthquake, he was not in the great mighty wind, he was in the still small voice. And sometimes you got to be real quiet to hear that still small voice.
It's funny how the approach that the author of your book on leisure takes a similar approach. Because while he doesn't give a definition of what leisure is, like you said, he spends a lot of time highlighting what it isn't. And God did the same with Elijah. Demonstrations of power, things that would overwhelm the senses, things that would impress upon your mind and body awe and wonder and danger. And not that awe and wonder isn't of God. But the point is that it was in the still small voice.
Yeah.
Something else that just reminded me too was a thought I had regarding your discussion of work. So much of modern work is just like noise. So much of it is the half man, half machine, superhuman saving the world and wandering the beach in despair afterwards. Like, look at all the things I've done, look at all the things I've built. But he knows in his heart that he actually hasn't done anything that would satisfy him, would build him up. He's devastated inside, and he despairs. compare that with good work and good leisure, which is like Sam coming home to Rosie and Eleanor, which is what it's all for.
Yeah. My job is done, and now I'm back.
Mm-hmm. How did people in old times used to do leisure compared to us? I mean, we've talked a lot about today, but did they used to have a lot of it? Did they used to have very little of it?
Well, so the way that people used to live their lives differed strongly from the way that we live our lives now. So, a long time ago, work itself actually, it was basically from sun up until sundown for the average common working man. You would get up at dawn, and then you would labor in the fields at dusk. Now, it's not that you're constantly moving and constantly doing things for, the 14 hours that the sun is up during the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Because that day was also broken up by various rituals, various prayers, and various sacrifices, which brings us back to leisure being also necessarily a religious thing. So having time to pray is also a leisurely thing. Prayer is a form of leisure. So people used to wake up at dawn and they would go to bed at dusk. And then they would sleep through the night. Well, what happens when days get shorter and nights get longer? Well, there is what's called I don't know if this is the official term for it, but it's the medieval sleep cycle.
Okay.
Where, you get up at dawn and you're awake throughout the day, and then you go to bed at dusk. In the middle of the afternoon, you might take a little nap. An hour or two. And now that is what in Italian and Spanish societies today is riposo or the siesta. Now that has to do with the fact that, you have to rest even during the day. So you get up and you work, and then and that's how they do it today in Spain and in Italy now. They get up basically at dawn and they go to work, but during riposo, nothing happens. The British have tea time. Everybody has their afternoon tea that they're just sitting and they're drinking tea. That is the time of rest during the day. Now that changes in the wintertime because the nights are longer. So when it shifts to the nights being 14 hours, well, we don't need 14 hours of sleep. So what usually happens is you go to bed at dusk and then you wake up in the middle of the night and you're doing stuff for a couple of hours. You might light a candle and you'll just read by candlelight. Or you'll pray. Or whatever. But that was kind of how leisure was approached back then. And then nobody works on Sunday. You don't so much as touch a plow on Sunday. Or any holy day. Basically the fields will be okay for one day.
Mm-hmm.
Go to mass. Pray. Go to the festival. And sing and dance with your family. Now, there are also times of the year where there are extended festivals. German societies celebrate Oktoberfest. And that's usually a celebration of the end of the last harvest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We have done our last harvest. We have sustained ourselves through the summer. We have set aside enough to sustain ourselves for the winter. Now let's take what's left and make a bunch of beer. And let's make a lot of sausage. And let's sing and dance for a week. And there are other times when you might do this too. It's not just necessarily at parts of year. Weddings in a lot of places are like this.
Okay.
There are countries where a wedding lasts 3 days. Because they're eating, drinking, they're dancing, they're celebrating, and that is worth celebrating. Because a new family has just been created. A new family has just been born. And now there's going to be children coming out of them. Hopefully. Like that is something that is worth celebrating. That's why most societies celebrated weddings with a lot of drinking, a lot of dancing. And that also is a form of leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes you away from your day's work, your menial labor, and your servile work. Because you're resting your mind from your worries and your cares. And on Sunday, you're taking it to our Lord. And you're thinking about our Lord. On holy days, you're thinking about whoever the holy day is for, about Our Lady or about one of the saints. During a festival, it's whatever the festival is about. Oktoberfest, you're just happy the harvest is over.
Mm-hmm.
During a wedding, you're there and you're thinking and you're happy for the people who just got married. And it was the whole town. The whole village is there. Everyone is there. Depending on how important the bride and or groom are, people from other towns come in. If you've ever been to a small town parish picnic, you know what I mean. Particularly if there are parishes in your area that have really good parish picnics. My parish has one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall.
Oh, nice.
We might have one in the winter too. People from other towns come to our parish picnic. And folks from our parish will go to their parish picnics. Because in that little area, it's all a bunch of German communities. So they're German, so they know how to party, and they're Catholic, so they know how to party even more. Basically, they all go to each other's parish picnics. They know how to celebrate, and they're there to celebrate and just be together. So we haven't completely lost it, but it has almost slipped away.
I mean, as you say it, you're describing such a simple, healthy life. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, this is so foreign to me. Like, I take that in, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do with that.
So that's why a lot of people actually were opposed to an 8-hour workday, because 8 hours of working straight without stopping was a foreign concept to most people. And even in an 8-hour workday, you're given breaks. The way it at least should be done is you work for 2 hours, you break, you work for 2 hours, you have lunch, you work for 2 hours, you break again, and then you work for another 2 hours, and then you go home.
Because that's what, the law says you have to have.
It's what the law says you have to have, but the law says that partly because human nature kind of demands it. Is that man is meant to work, but man is not meant to work constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the simple life of work and prayer. The Benedictine way. To pray and to work. That's having the proper balance of work and leisure.
It still feels so foreign. And I say that because I'm not dismissing any of the good of it. If anything, I'm praising it. I'm saying I need that. But I'm also conscious of how just my body and soul react to hearing that. And it's just, I'm so used to just the hamster wheel. Like I brought up earlier.
Yeah,
And
people hear that and their first reaction is, well, you just don't want to work. No, I do. There's nothing farther from my mind.
mm-hmm.
But I don't want to work myself to the bone.
No, because what's the point of work? It's not to work yourself to the bone.
Yeah, hard work for hard work's sake is pointless and should be avoided at all costs.
The reason we don't condemn the guy who used to get up at 4:30 in the morning and work till 6 in the evening to put food on the table is because he's doing it to put food on the table.
And it's because at that time, and even today in a lot of times, in a lot of cases, that is necessary.
Mm-hmm. But it's a bit less necessary when you need enough nice things and when it's also to set 15% of your income away for retirement.
Yeah.
You know? Some might say that's necessary. I'm not going to get into that argument too deep on this podcast, but there's a rant to be had there, which we've already done part of. So, yeah. And when I say I'm reacting against it, like, I know I need it. I know that's what my body and soul long for. It's just like, I'll ask you this. How do you take the average person today and not just tell them this stuff about leisure, like we happen to be doing, but how do you get them to a point where they actually live a properly leisurely life with a proper conception of work in there too, because you can't not have that.
Well, a lot of it has to start with people changing their perspective. I think part of the reason that people work the way that they do is, I think, because they don't actually know how much they have, or how much what you actually need to survive. Like a house with running water and air conditioning and heating for the wintertime, a good vehicle to get you and your family to and from places,
Mm-hmm.
so reliable transportation, a roof over your head, and food in your stomach. That's kind of it. Yeah, you don't even really need an internet connection. There's an argument for it being almost a need, particularly today,
Mm-hmm.
in our modern society, just to be able to keep up with people. But, people also used to just get their news by talking to other human beings.
Maybe have the internet connection, but have one cheaper. And maybe, yeah, go to your local coffee shop.
One that has, even if that means having one that has a limited data plan. And yeah, go to your coffee shop, go to your public library and use their computer if you need to check email. There's nothing shameful about that.
I've realized I can't recommend the coffee shop for news thing because that involves recommending press that I don't trust. But anyway, the general point still stands. Just like if you listen to the list of necessities and say, well, you got to have health and life insurance too. Fine. The point still stands. Don't miss the forest for the trees.
An argument can be made against health and life insurance too. I would take life insurance over, if I had to choose one, I would take the life insurance. But you can make an argument against health insurance. You don't actually need it. Most places, if you tell them that you're cash only, they won't actually charge you all that much.
You can get some good discounts.
You can get a lot of really good discounts for medical services if you're cash only. So keeping, all of this in mind, and you don't need the latest technology. You don't need the latest this, you don't need the latest that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the things that I own that aren't books I'd say probably 80% of it is secondhand
Hmm.
or gifted to me by someone. There's no shame in that either.
I realize as we go through this, we're kind of sounding like the Amish. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Because while I think the Amish overdo the way in which they do things,
Yes. Oh, they overdo it by they completely cut themselves off from the outside world, and they have no sense of community with people outside of themselves or people that make the effort to come into their own area.
which is a problem, a very big problem.
It's the isolationism is the biggest problem.
And yet at the
Another big
same
problem
time,
is that they treat animals like machines.
and yet at the same time, when the Amish have been discussing, like, do we get a cell phone? If we do, how does that work? The principle at play there for them is, how does it build up community? Ironic, given that they've cut themselves off from the outside world, but still within their community, that point is a great one. That principle is a great one.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about needs, necessities, leisure,
Now, I would say that the one that's closer to the right approach is the Mennonite approach. Because the way that the Mennonites approach technology, because the Amish will pretty much reject all modern technology except in the case of dire necessity. Mennonites don't entirely reject modern technology, but anytime there is a new technology introduced, they kind of sit back and watch it to see how it affects everything before they actually adopt it themselves. Now, that is closer to what the right approach should be to modern technology. Now, I think maybe the more in line with rerum novarum approach to modern technology is that when there is a new technology, we should have people who are virtuous. We should have virtuous people going and actually learning about it and learning what it is. Basically, the people who know about the technology should also have informed consciences. Your first question shouldn't be, well, I want to sit back and see how this affects everybody else before I partake in the technology. Your first question should be, all right, let me take a good close look at this technology, and a bunch of us are going to do this together. How can it be used ethically and morally and correctly and to the betterment of society?
I love it. Absolutely love it. Because
That's how you should be approaching modern technology.
I see way too much of this, way too much of the either opposite vice opposed to that virtuous mean.
Either I completely reject or I 100% just immediately accept everything that is new.
Yep.
And shine.
But I'll save some of my rant there for the AI podcast that we eventually do.
Well, and it's not just for technology either. It's for methods and things. And I remember when I was teaching, we had teacher conferences once a week. We're always on Thursdays. And in one of these teacher conferences, the principal told all the rest of us that she had just read this article in whatever teaching magazine about some process or method that was statistically working in several schools. Oh, so we should try it. And we should just do it. And the only reason that you really want to do it is because it's new. It's shiny and new.
And you can outsource some of your intellectual work to the studies.
Yep.
The way in which you should be analyzing it, you can get away from it.
Yeah, so I think when we are approaching new technologies and new methods, we shouldn't flat out reject them and say that they're bad because they're new and they're modern.
Mm-hmm.
We also shouldn't just flat out accept them because they're new and they're modern.
Yep.
And I wouldn't recommend also doing what the Mennonites do, even though they've managed to do it for as long as they have. And kind of just sit back and observe everybody else use it before you decide to use it yourself. I think new technology should be used at arm's length until we can figure out what the most ethical and proper and virtuous way of using it is. Now, I think if the internet had been invented in the Middle Ages, it would be a very different internet than what we have today.
Yeah.
When the average person, and even the average intellectual, was significantly far more ethical and virtuous and moral than the average person today. Or the average person when the internet was invented.
Would potentially be more questions. Questions asked of it. Questions keeping it at arm's length, like you said. Questions that ultimately devolve to, in one form or another, how do I make this thing serve me rightly? As opposed to, how do I serve it rightly?
Yeah.
Which is the approach that too many people unfortunately take with modern technology.
Yes, too often the idleness of the use of modern technology. Technology is meant to be an aid to work. It is not meant to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
And the approach that we take to modern technology is one that lends itself to idleness. And idleness has the opposite effect of leisure. Because idleness is just giving yourself over and surrendering the purpose for which you were made, which was to till the earth and to keep it,
Mm-hmm.
and to work. Now remember, God just said to till the earth and keep it. He didn't say not to use a plow. Till the earth and keep it, and also know, love, and serve God.
So if I'm giving advice to myself and to people watching, how can we implement the things that we've talked about so far and make our lives better lives with regards to work and leisure? Counteracting or trying to get away from a life that leads to where I feel like I have no time. I feel like I'm just running at a frenetic pace from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and yet getting nothing done at the same time. Weird paradox, but at least I find myself living that to a point. And I feel like a good antidote to that is to, one, develop a better idea of what right work is and right leisure is, like we've dedicated a couple podcasts to now. But also, do that calendar thing for your week that Dr. Bungum had us do in one of those courses at UMary. So just for a week, make a calendar of 7 days for each half-hour period of the day, or hour, or, something along those lines, and just observe yourself and track what you do. And categorize it. This is time of prayer. This is time of sleep. This is time of work. This is time of leisure. This is time of play. And just see how your week shakes out. And then try and use that to both utilize your time in the week more, but also use it to organize your week more. Like, maybe I don't need to look at the news 50 times throughout the day for 30-second intervals. That doesn't seem to be conducive to my sanity, my peace, and my time. So why don't I just take a couple 10-minute periods during some evening or some morning in the week? I'll get the same amount done, or at least I'll get the amount done that I actually need to sustain myself and my family and be informed about the things that are worth being informed about.
Yeah.
And then I'll move on. I'll move on to things that are better and higher and can actually benefit me in the world and build up me in the world. Like we've said that work and leisure ought to do.
Well, yeah, because all those, what may seem like brief intervals of staring at your phone, those add up.
Mm-hmm.
And little tiny increments add up to a lot of time eventually.
Yep.
So maybe cut out that thing that doesn't do you any good that you do for little tiny increments at a time. I saw a short recently of a guy breaking down the number of hours that there are in a week. I think he said 168 hours in a week. And we'll just say that, and that's over a 7-day period.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take 24 out of that because Sunday is Sunday. It should be set aside.
Sure.
So at that point, that's 154 hours in a week that you're actually working.
144.
144, excuse me. So 144 hours. Well, let's say you spend 40 hours of that working. And another 40 of that sleeping. If you're getting proper sleep, you should be getting probably 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. The argument can be made you can operate on 6 or 7 or around there.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say in the best case scenario, you got 40 hours of work and you got 40 hours of sleep. In 144 hours.
No, you
That
just
leaves
crested half.
Yeah. That leaves 64 hours in the available week. We'll take 8 because we're counting Saturday in the week. We'll take another 8 off of that for sleep. But then that basically just leaves you with 56 hours for the rest of the week. What are you doing for 56 hours? Okay, do you have a half-hour commute that adds another hour onto your time that's dedicated to work? Find a job that's closer. Cut your commute time in half. Or down to a third.
And even if you don't, you haven't taken anything meaningfully off of the 56 hours.
Yeah, even then, you've taken maybe another 5 hours off of that.
Yeah.
Now it's down to 51 hours. So what are you doing that is wasting 51 hours? Genuinely wasting 51 hours, and you're saying you don't have time. You don't have time for this, or you don't have time for that. What are you actually doing? So when you realize that, and you realize that if your first priority is actually just your needs, and you only really focus on what it is that you actually need in life, that you and your family actually need, and you go without the rest of the things that you can go without, you wind up realizing that, you can actually live relatively comfortably compared to the rest of the world on $50,000-$60,000 a year.
Yeah.
Which is an absurd number to most people these days. Most people think you have to make 80 to barely get by, at least. If not 90 or 100.
I'm reminded of an exercise I once partook in. Where they had people try and guess, like, okay, how much are you going to need? Like, how much are you going to need to make a year in life married? And people would give a number. And then they would go up to on a board or whatever, and they would start listing off, like, well, what are the things you're going to need? You're going to have a house payment. You're going to have a car payment. You're going to have foods like this much. you've got your utilities, you've got your this insurance and that insurance, and you've got all these other things. And before you know it, that number gets to like 120,000. I think I remember. And I'd be curious to, in light of this conversation, go back to that time. If I could like try and time travel back to that time and see what was on that board again.
Of what are your actual needs?
Yeah.
Because let's also remember that, what kind of car are we talking about?
Yeah.
When you say you need a vehicle, what do you need?
You need something that gets you from point A to point B reliably.
You and your family
That is,
from point A
yes.
to point B
Yes.
reliably.
But that is all. As much as I love a Toyota 4Runner, I don't have one. I would love one. There's no reason I need one. Absolutely none. Eventually I might, hopefully. But
I'm fortunate enough to own 2 cars that are paid off. I have 2 vehicles and no car payments.
nice.
One of them is a 2008 that I bought in 2020. It was 14 years old when I bought it.
Yep.
And the other is a 2013.
I'm pretty much the same boat. Just
So
got one, obviously, but it was an 09 that I bought in 23, and
it works.
Yeah.
It works fine.
Works.
And you've driven it at least 3 times from Minnesota to here.
Yep. And sure, I put that thing on a 5-year payment plan, but it was paid off in 13 months because I focused my time and energy towards that, and now I have a paid off car.
Yeah, there's used cars everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be ashamed to have something used. And don't be ashamed to get things secondhand.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's secondhand, the fact that you have it means that you're living in the top 15% of the world.
This is true.
And even so, in the United States, even if we're talking first world countries, the average person in the United States, the average poor person that's living below what we consider to be the poverty line, I just heard this statistic today, lives in a house that's about 5 times the average size of a house in Japan.
Really.
Square footage.
I want to know what the average size of a house is in Japan.
Well, that's the place with the micro. That's also the country with the micro hotels where it's just, you basically go to sleep in a Foot Locker
I did not know this.
and call that fancy. A lot of things about Japan I don't get, but I'm not Japanese, so that, it's perfectly rational and reasonable.
I knew there's a reason you love their culture. Just kidding.
The average person living below the poverty line here is living a significantly better lifestyle than the average person below the poverty line in Uganda.
Yeah.
A poor person here lives like one of the richest men in Uganda. A lot of it has to do with shifting your perspective.
A poor person here can't afford life insurance. Maybe. Or
a poor person here can't afford a brand new car.
Yeah.
A poor person in Uganda has to decide which child to feed today.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 5.
We have big tummies for a reason, and they have big tummies for a very different reason.
Yes.
That's a dark way of putting it. But
yes.
Well, it's a thing. So next time that I, can't have my steak dinner or something, you should just remember that.
But yeah, and even when you're approaching your necessities, when you're thinking about your necessities, go with the option that is the best balance of cost and quality.
Yep.
When you go grocery shopping, shop at Aldi.
It's about what you value. Like there's real value and beauty to frugality. Aldi shopping as opposed to Kowalski shopping, for any Minnesotans listening. And then there's a right place for the buy once, cry once mentality, like buy quality, you know? And the way to balance those in your life is just to understand what matters,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, I don't need the $30 DoorDash fast food lunch.
No.
But I can enjoy a nice $50 book.
Well, you're going to enjoy the $50 book, hopefully, for a lot longer than you'll enjoy the $30 lunch.
Yes.
It's also about, the amount of time that you're spending money on.
The amount of time, but just the intrinsic value of the thing too, you know? And what it does in your house and in your family long term, you know? This is why we don't talk about, the value of having fine food in the fridge in the same way that we talk about having a fine library. Just don't. One intrinsically matters more.
Yeah.
And nothing Gordon Ramsay can say can change my mind.
Although I'm sure the culinary arts will be a topic of discussion for this podcast at some point.
Sure.
And I don't know that Gordon Ramsay would completely disagree with you, because I have more than once heard him talk about cooking something excellent with what most obnoxiously snobbish people would think are crap and trash ingredients. Where do you think brisket came from? It is the
true.
best part of the cow.
Because it's a cheap cut.
And for decades, people thought now it's the most expensive cut of the cow, because people realize how delicious it is. But for decades, people just threw it away.
It's cooked with the most love. Literally. The most time. And there's a reason beyond utility for that. Well, the utilitarian argument is strong enough, but no, look what it does.
I would say a hefty plate of brisket is one of the only things that I enjoy more than a well-cooked pork chop. As far as main courses are concerned, anyway.
Yeah, there's just more time and love put into it.
Yeah. But anyway, that's a topic of discussion for the food episode.
Yes. Anything to close us out with?
This is a poem that Joseph Pieper references. And I think this probably describes leisure almost perfectly. This is Leisure by a man named Hölderlin. I stand in the peaceful mowing like a loving elm tree, while sweetly life plays and twines around me, like vines and clusters of grapes. And if you're from the South, that's what we like to call porch sitting. Go out on your front porch, do some setting, do some picking, maybe a little pipe smoke, and watch the world go by, and glory in all that God has made. Thank you for watching. Now go and do likewise.
Indeed.